Down the slope of the street, Selenia could perfectly see the 2 slave ships sitting, still unmoving, in the bay, and the mast-snapping chain not too far from them. Unfortunately, from his angle, so could Rolfe. The sky had turned light grey. Dawn. Selenia bowed her head to the pirate lord. "I'd rather not get my hands dirty in that mess." Rolfe's lips formed a thin line. "Funny, given that you tripped the man who started the brawl." Sam glared at her. She'd been subtle, damn it! Rolfe drew his sword, the dragon's eyes gleaming in the growing light. "And also funny, since you've been spoiling for a fight for days, that you'd suddenly decided to vanish when everyone's attention is elsewhere." Sam raised his hands. "We don't want any trouble." Rolfe chuckled, a harsh, humorous sound. "Maybe you don't, Sam Cortland, but she does." Rolfe stepped forward towards her, his sword dangling at his side. "She's wanted trouble since the moment she got here. What's your plan? Steal treasure? Information?" From the corner of her eye, something shifted in the ships, like a bird flexing its wings. A row of oars shot out from their sides. They were ready, and the chain was still up. "Don't look, don't look, don't look, don't look, don't look." But Rolfe looked, and Selenia's breathing turned shallow as he scanned the ships. Sam tensed, his knees bending slightly. "I am going to kill you, Selenia Saradothin." Rolfe breathed, and he meant it. Selenia's fingers tightened around her sword, and Rolfe opened his mouth, lungs filled with air as he prepared to shout a warning. Quick as a whip, she did the only thing she could think of to distract him. Her mask clattered to the ground, and she shook her hood off, her golden hair gleaming in the growing light. Rolfe froze. You're... What sort of trickery is this?" Beyond them, the oars began moving, churning the water as the boats turned towards the chain, and freedom beyond it. "Go," she murmured to Sam. "Now!" Sam only nodded before he sprinted down the street. Alone with Rolfe, Selenia raised her sword. "Selenia Saradothin, at your service." The pirate was still staring at her, his face pale with rage. How dare you deceive me?" She stretched a bow. "I did nothing of the sort. I told you I was beautiful." Before she could stop him, Rolfe shouted, "They're trying to steal our ships! To your boats! To the watchtower!" A roar erupted around them, and Selenia prayed that Sam could reach the watchtower before the pirates caught him. Selenia began circling the pirate lord. He circled her too. He wasn't drunk in the least. "How old are you?" Each of his steps were carefully placed, but she noticed that he kept shifting to expose his left side. 16. She didn't bother keeping up pretenses. Rolfe swore. "A Robin sent a 16-year-old to deal with me." "He sent the best of the best, Consider that an honor. With a growl, the pirate lord lunged. She danced back, swinging up her sword to block the blow he'd aimed for her throat. She didn't need to kill him right away. Just distract him long enough to prevent him from further organizing his men, and kept him away from the ships. She had to buy Sam enough time to disable the chain and the catapults. The ships were already turning towards the mouth of the bay. Rolfe launched himself again, and she let him land 2 strikes on her sword before she ducked the 3rd blow and slammed into him. She swept her foot, and Rolfe staggered back a step. Not missing a beat, she pulled out her long hunting knife, slashing for his chest. She let her blow fall short, ripping through the fine blue material of his tunic instead. Rolfe stumbled into the wall of the building behind him, and caught his footing and dodged the blow that would have taken off his head. The vibrations of her sword hitting stone stung her hand, but she kept hold of the hilt. What was the plan? Rolfe panted above the roaring of the pirates rushing towards the docks. Steal my slaves and take all the profit? She laughed, feigning to his right, but sweeping for his unprotected left with her dagger. To her surprise, Rolfe deflected both moves in a swift, sure motion. To free them, she said. Beyond the chain, beyond the mouth of the bay, the clouds on the horizon began to colour with the light of the coming dawn. Fool! Rolfe spat, and this time feigned so well that even Selenia couldn't avoid the rake of his sword across her arm. Warm blood seeped through her black tunic. She hissed, darting away a few steps. A careless mistake. You think freeing 200 slaves will solve anything? Rolfe kicked a fallen bottle of liquor at her. She knocked it aside with the flat of her sword, her right arm screaming in pain. Glass shattered behind her. There are thousands of slaves out there. Are you going to march into Calacula and Endovia to free them too? Behind him, the steady strokes of the oars propelled the ships forward towards the chain. Sam had to hurry. Rolfe shook his head. Stupid girl! If I don't kill you, your master will. Not giving him the luxury of a warning, she threw herself at him. She ducked, twirling, and Rolfe barely turned before she slammed the pommel of her sword into the back of his head. The pirate lord crumpled to the street, just as a crowd of bloodied and filthy pirates appeared around the corner. Selenia only had time to throw her hood over her head, hoping the shadows concealed enough of her face before she took off at a run. It didn't take much to get away from a group of half-drunk, battle-crazed pirates. She only had to lead them down a few twisted streets, and then she lost them. But the wound on her arm still slowed her considerably as she ran for the watchtower. Sam was already far ahead. Releasing the chain was now in his hands. Pirates raged up and down the docks, seeking any boat that was in working order. That had been the final leg of her journey last night, disabling the rudders in all of the ships along the docks, including Rolfe's own ship, the Sea Dragon, which honestly deserved to be tampered with, given the security on board was so lax. But despite the damage, some pirates managed to find rowboats and piled into them, brandishing swords or cutlasses or axes and shouting profanities to the highest heavens. The ramshackled buildings blurred as she sprinted towards the watchtower. Her breath was ragged in her throat. a night of no sleep already taking its toll. She burst past pirates on the docks, too busy bemoaning their ruined boats to notice her. The slaves still rode for the chain, as if demons from every realm of hell were upon them. Selenia charged down the road, heading for the edge of town. With the sloping, wide-open road, she could see Sam racing far ahead, and a large group of pirates not too far behind him. The cut on her arm throbbed, but she pushed herself to run faster. Sam had mere minutes to get the chain down, or else the slave ships would be shattered upon it. Even if the slave ships were able to stop before they hit it, there were enough smaller boats heading out that the pirates would overpower them. The pirates had weapons. Aside from whatever was on board, the slaves were unarmed, even if many of them had been warriors and rebels. There was a flash of movement from the half-crumbled tower. Steel glimmered, and there was Sam, charging up the staircase that wound up the outside of the tower. Two pirates rushed down the steps, swords raised. Sam dodged one, knocking him down with a swift strike to his spine. Before the pirate had even finished falling, Sam's blade skewered the other man clean through the middle. But there was still Shipbreaker to disable, along with the two catapults, and the dozen pirates who had now reached the foot of the tower. Selenia cursed. She was still too far. There was no way she could make it in time to disable the chain. The ships would crash into it long before she got there. She swallowed the pain in her arm, focusing on her breathing as she ran and ran, not daring to take her eyes off of the tower ahead. Sam, still a tiny figure in the distance, reached the top of the tower and the expanse of the open stone where the anchor of the chain lay. Even from here, she could tell it was gargantuan. And as Sam rushed around it, hacking at whatever he could, throwing himself against the enormous lever, both of them realized the horrible truth. The one thing she'd overlooked. The chain was too heavy for one man to move. The slave ships were now close. So close that stopping was impossible. They were going to die. But the slaves didn't cease rowing. The dozen pirates were climbing the stairs. Sam had been trained to engage multiple men in combat, but a dozen pirates? Damn Rolfe and his men for delaying her! Sam glanced towards the stairs. He knew about the pirates too. She could see everything with such maddening clarity. Sam remained atop the tower. A level below him, perched on a platform, jutting out over the sea, sat the two catapults. And in the bay, the two ships that rode with increasing speed. Freedom or death. Sam slung himself down to the catapult level, and Selenia staggered a step as he hurled himself against the rotating platform on which the catapult sat, pushing and pushing until the catapult began to move. Not towards the sea, but towards the tower itself. Towards the spot in the stone wall where the chain was anchored. She didn't dare take her attention from the tower as Sam heaved the catapult into position. A boulder had already been loaded, and in the glare of the rising sun, she could just make out the rope stretched taut to secure the catapult. The pirates were almost at the catapult level. The two ships rowed faster and faster, the chain so close that its shadow loomed over them. Selenia sucked in a breath as the pirates poured onto the catapult landing, weapons held high. Sam raised his sword, light from the sunrise gleaming off the blade, bright as a star. A warning cry broke from her lips as a pirate's dagger flipped towards Sam. Sam brought his sword down on the catapult rope, doubling over. The catapult snapped so fast she could hardly follow the motion. The boulder slammed into the tower, shattering stone, wood and metal. Rock exploded, dust clouding the air. And with a boom that echoed across the bay, the chain collapsed, taking out a chunk of the tower, taking out the spot where she'd last seen Sam. Selenia, reaching the tower at last, paused to watch the white sails of the slave ships unfurled, glowing golden in the sunlight. The wind filled their sails and set them cruising, flying swiftly from the mouth of the bay and into the ocean beyond it. By the time the pirates fixed their ships, the slaves would be far too far away to catch. She murmured a prayer for them, to find a safe harbour, her words carrying on the wings of the wind, and wished them well. A block of stone crashed near her. Selenia's heart gave a lurch. Sam. He couldn't be dead. Not from that dagger, or those dozen pirates, or even the catapult. No. No, Sam couldn't be so stupid that he'd get himself killed. She'd kill him if he was dead. Drawing her sword, despite the ache in her arm, she made to rush for the half-wrecked tower, but a dagger pressed against her neck, halting her in her tracks. "I don't think so," Rolfe whispered in her ear.